Ani Bojo. I acknowledge that this is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat Nations. It's our privilege to be on this territory and to be here as Toronto Urban Native Ministry, serving food to people on the streets in need. And we extend our solidarity to everyone who's struggling at this time, especially all the First Nations without access to clean water and sustainable food sources. So our solidarity and prayers with everyone on the front lines during this crisis.
Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh. Wichita today, hey, hey. Wichita today, hey, oh.
Sego, bonjour, Mache, hello, welcome. Creator, we give you thanks for all you are and all you bring to us for a visit within your creation. In Jesus, you place the gospel at the center of this sacred circle through which all of creation is related. You show us a way to live a generous and compassionate life. Give us your strength for us to live together with respect and commitment as we grow in your spirit. For you are our God now and forever. I'm lighting the smudge. I gotta make sure.
Is my car leaving going to blow up your CBC video?
If they're editing it, they can edit this part out.
Okay.
So maybe if you could leave quick so we can recommence.
Are you done?
No, but they can, if they're editing it, they can edit it out. And now they'll need to edit out me saying that over and over again. So, let him leave and then we'll restart. I mean, I can stop it too and we can...
I'd like to acknowledge that eastern direction, where the sun rises, new beginnings start as we're on our spiritual path. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say, Jimikwich, now go on. I'd like to acknowledge that southern direction, the direction where the summertime is, a lot of growth, a lot of action. This is the direction when we're walking and we're beginning in our spiritual path. We are learning and getting out there in action. And if I'm unaware of it, anything, or if I'll acknowledge that now and say, Jimikwich, now go. I'd like to acknowledge our western direction. This is the direction of the great mystery and great unknown. This is a direction where we get our answers from the Creator. This is also a direction where we walk out of. And if I haven't mentioned it, anything, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say, Jimikwich, and now I'll go. I'd like to acknowledge that northern direction, the direction where the Spirit is. This is where we sleep when we're tired, eat when we're hungry. This is when we come together as brothers and sisters and share our stories and our songs. And if I'm unaware of it, or if I haven't mentioned it, I'll acknowledge that now and say, Jimikwich, and now I'll go. They're here. I'd like to acknowledge our ancestors. These are the ones that worked hard in our lives when they were alive. They could be a grandma, a grandpa, an auntie, or an uncle. A spiritual mentor, or someone that you hold in high esteem as they're working for us, still to this day. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now. Say, Jimikwich, now I'm going to our spirit help us. I like to acknowledge Mother Earth. She's always there, always providing unconditionally. She provides us with all our clothing, all our food, and all our shelter. And this is a time for us to remember her and to take care of her. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of some things, I'll acknowledge that now. Say, Jimikwich, and now I go. And then I like to acknowledge that center as we enter into creation, where we meet our Creator. The Creator at birth had given us a good mind to say kind words and praises with our brothers and sisters. The Creator has known us by our name. We all have a name. This is where we offer our petitions and our prayers. And I also like to acknowledge all the prayer warriors from yesterday of April 1st who are doing really hard in their prayers. All prayer warriors are welcome. And if I haven't mentioned it, or if I'm unaware of it, I'll acknowledge that now and say, Jimikwich, now I'm going. Jimikwich, 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 Jimikwich.
Hi everybody, today I'd like to share part of the Gospel of Mark with you. This is from chapter 6. Jesus has called together his 12 disciples. He sent them out into different communities. They've been traveling. They're exhausted. They've been working miracles. They've been healing people. And they've just returned to tell Jesus about everything that they've done. So this is Mark chapter 6, verse 30. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all they had done and taught. Then Jesus said, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. I don't know about you, but when they announced that the schools were closing, at least in my province, we scrambled. We scrambled to get food. We joined the hordes of people trying to find one set of toilet paper for our family of 6. We made sure that we had all of the things that we needed within reason. Yet it felt busy. What is amazing to me, as we're several weeks into self-isolation, is how quickly everything happened. One afternoon, we were out as a family. We were just living our lives like normal. We knew that the virus existed, but it didn't feel that close to home. And then on our way home in the car, I was listening to CBC and they announced that the schools were closing. And suddenly it felt like everything just sped up. It felt like everything got fast. We had all these things that we needed to do. And looking back, I still can't believe how fast it seemed to go. It was like time sped up. I know for many of us, we struggled. We went into this sort of overdrive mode. Those of us who are working figured out how to work from home. I know for myself, I had to clean up my home office that I never used so that I even had a spot to use my laptop. We figured out what to do with the kids. We have a bustling toddler at home, and trying to figure out how to keep him entertained was not easy. I know that for many of my ministry colleagues, they've struggled to put their church online, and it means learning technology. I know that for my girl guides, their parents have taught them how to use Zoom. All of this stuff happened, and it happened so fast that within a few days I was able to step back and just realize how much had happened in such a little amount of time. And then that night came where instead of sleeping because I was totally exhausted, I started to panic. It was the first time that I had really rested, and the panic started to set in. What if my friends get sick? What if I get sick? What if my congregants get sick? Our ministry does so much outreach in prisons and hospitals and with folks living on the street or who are street involved. And I realized that in under 24 hours, everything had changed. And it was in that moment of rest that I started to reflect. I started to reflect on what this meant for my family, what this meant for my work, what this meant for our children. We read in the Bible that the apostles were taken by Jesus to rest because they didn't even have time to eat. I don't know about you, but in the first few days, it was almost like I didn't have time for anything. And so they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so he began teaching them many things. Many of you might know that my partner is a teacher, so I've seen the scramble that teachers are undergoing to get lessons suddenly online, to figure out what kids have access to technology. I've seen the Facebook posts going around from parents who are trying to suddenly start homeschooling their children. They're feeling this pressure for the academic year to continue. I know in Ontario, they recently announced that that youth will still be graded on their work in school. And so there's this immense amount of pressure happening right now, especially for parents and teachers around how will education follow. There's also been demands from those of us who work in businesses. People still want their products and goods. I know that we can see it so easily in grocery stores and retail places where folks are trying to get the things that they need for their family, and yet there's all this pressure on the people who are working in stores to stock, and it must feel pretty awful. We can see it in our medical care workers who are scrambling. They don't have enough personal protective equipment. They don't know what's happening. The virus is, multiplying so quickly that our medical facilities are already becoming stretched, and it hasn't even really hit yet. And so, like Jesus, there was this period where some of us started to feel a little bit of rest, and then all of a sudden there was this pressure to be productive again, to contribute to the physical parts of our world. And those things are needed, but I wonder what it does for our mental health. Jesus goes on in our story to notice that the people are suffering. They've been there all day, they've been waiting for him, they've been listening to his teachings, and now they're getting hungry. I think that in our trauma response, often, we are starving and we don't even notice. And then we eat, and maybe we don't notice that either. And so Jesus commands the disciples to feed them. And the disciples do figure out a way to multiply the small amount that they have to support the whole community. And I think we've seen this too. We've seen groups like Caremongering on Facebook. We've seen companies donating protective equipment. We've seen people stepping up and start sewing things. folks who didn't know their neighbors at all have started checking in on them. And so Jesus feeds the masses with his disciples. But it goes on to say that immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and head across the lake. And he sent all the people home. What I notice in this chapter of Mark is that there's this ebb and flow where things start easy and they're busy, and then Jesus is intentional about a calm time, and then the pressure is on again, especially from the people in the community, and Jesus responds to the best of his ability, but then also leads his disciples into these moments of calm. And so after sending the people home, Jesus goes out into the mountains and he goes by himself to pray. I think for those of us of any faith tradition, we've spent some time praying through this. Sometimes it feels like the only thing that we can do. And you would think that this is when Jesus finally gets his rest, but all of a sudden he gets woken up in the middle of the night. His disciples had gone out in their boat, and now a storm has happened, and they're panicked, they're struggling, they're probably freaking out. And around 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus wakes and he calms the storm again. Jesus says to them, "Don't be afraid, take courage, I am here." And that's when he climbed in the boat and the wind stopped. In the Gospel of Mark, we see this urgency all through it, that Jesus performs miracles now. There's the way that the writer of Mark tells it is like Jesus reacts quickly. But there's also this pattern that emerges through Mark where Jesus takes these times of rest to calm down. I know that so many of us are facing so much pressure right now. A lot of us are figuring out how to work at home. A lot of us are figuring out how to work at home and also do childcare. We're now feeling pressure from educators to make sure that our kids are equipped with the right technology and that they can attend school every day. And it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure for everybody. There's also those in our community that are on their own. Some of my friends have been suddenly thrust into isolation, into their apartments with no roommates, no family, no partners, or separated from them. And that feeling of immense loneliness is setting in. Thankfully, we have technology and we're able to reach out, but there's also people who are suffering and we don't even know yet. And so, my friends, as we go forward, remember that there's always been this ebb and flow of work, of rest. Know that Jesus has given us permission to take times of rest, even though it feels like there's so much pressure right now to just produce, whether it's work, whether it's school, whether it's grade A parenting. Jesus also gives us time to rest. For anyone on the front lines, we also need to figure out how to work that idea of Sabbath into our schedules. Our employers need to figure out how to come up with that time where we can contemplate, where we can take care of our bodies, where we can take care of our spiritual needs. Unfortunately, we know that this is going to be a long time. Next week, we're not all going back to school like we expected. We're not going back to our jobs. And so we need to figure out the ways that as a community and as families and as people that we can enter into that ebb and flow and recognize that there's going to be times when we're overwhelmed and when we feel so busy, but there's also going to be times where we'll have the opportunity to step back into that calmness, that peace that Jesus came to bring us. And so, friends, remember the words written in the scripture that God says, "Don't be afraid. I'm there with you." Know that no matter what is happening, regardless of your faith, your beliefs, you're not alone. Our entire global community is in this together right now. It certainly is a specific mark in the history of the world that this has happened. It's going to change our communities forever, hopefully for the better. But know that you don't need to be afraid, that you're not alone, and that even when that fear seems to overcome you, that will pass. Grief comes in waves. We know this. And so be kind to yourself. Take some of the pressure off. Right now, we just need to survive. We need to love one another. We need to take that time to reach out to the people that maybe we don't always reach out to. We need to look for the folks who are isolated and take care of them, and know that no matter what, God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God.
We take this moment to center ourselves. I invite you during these prayers of the people to respond to the petition, God in your mercy, with the words, pour out your love. We take this moment to center ourselves. We raise our hearts in gratitude for the gift of breath. We thank you, living Spirit, for the gift of our bodies, the lands and waters and relationships that sustain us. In this time of fear, we ask for your loving presence to comfort all whose bodies are full of exhaustion, fear, and anxiety. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For all who have died, grant them the blessed company of their ancestors and the peace of your eternal joy. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For their families, friends, and circles of community, for all who are grieving, God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For those who are sick, enfold them with your healing mercy, strengthen them with your presence, and restore them in body, mind, and spirit. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For those who are vulnerable at this time, especially our elders, frontline workers, our community members who are struggling, imprisoned, or are hungry, deliver the captives, provide shelter for the homeless, succor the oppressed, and empower and protect them from all harm. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For those who feel lonely, the shut-in and isolated, bring them the comfort of your presence. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. We'll just put Mary's crown back on there. For all our staff in our hospitals and our care centers, protect them as they minister, relieve their stress, and enable us all to provide the resources they need to serve your people. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For our first responders, service industry workers, grocery store clerks, and all people who labor during this time of crisis, God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For those who are afraid, who have lost jobs and wages, sustain and support them. God of our daily bread, fill our political leaders and communities with compassion that all might have equity and enough. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For those in positions of power, innovation, and authority at every level of society, illuminate their minds with the wisdom of your love. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. For children and families in this time, sustain them in difficult days and surprise them with unanticipated joys. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. for all who don't have a home during these days, for those without shelter, and for those for whom home is no sanctuary or place of safety. Protect them. Bring your angels to them in all guises to minister to them in their vulnerability, and bring them to places of sanctuary and peace. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. Inspire in your people love, care, and mutual aid during these difficult and fragile days. Sustain us, our great healer. God, in your mercy, pour out your love. Amen.
Thanks so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to sing for you. God says, be still, so you may hear the words I whisper in your ear. If you will listen, you will know I'm with you always where you go. God says, look up and see the prize I've placed here right before your eyes. Find beauty in the things of earth, a cause for wonder and rebirth. God says, come here, I need your voice. Please teach my people to rejoice in who you are, in what you do. Your life will show my love for you. God says, reach out, the world's in need and wants a word, a song, a deed. I send you forth to speak, to sing, to act for Christ in everything. Do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. God says, be still, so you may hear the words I whisper in your ear. If you will listen, you will know I'm with you always where you go.